Hey, from Texas, it's Lindy Fulford with Striking Splendor. And I've just finished up 2 series. One was your 5 love languages. The other one was the color code personality test. All of those relate to relationships and marriage tips on how to make relationships in your marriage stronger. So tonight I thought I would come and tell you just a quick high level of what the top 10 or 10 of the top reasons why people divorce. And then over the next few days, I'm just going to go a little bit deeper into what those are. So the number one of the top reasons people divorce is infidelity, right? It's not always as cut and dry as people may think it is. A lot of times these relationships start as just an emotional, friendly relationship, and they turn into something more. But it's usually because there's a deeper underlying problem within the marriage. Another reason is money. We all, if you've ever been married, if you are married, you know money is an issue. Several reasons why. We all have different spending habits, right? You come into a relationship, one person spends, one doesn't. We have different financial goals. And also it comes down to sometimes how much one person makes versus the other person. So it sometimes causes insecurities. Lack of communication. What happens here is people get frustrated, they get resentful, and it just leads down to a breakdown in the marriage because they're not able to communicate correctly, right? Which is why if you learn their love language and you learn their color code, that's a great step to overcoming that, right? Constant arguing. People argue about so many things. People argue about chores. People argue about kids. People argue about money. And a lot of times it just becomes this circular motion where you argue, you make up, you argue again, you make up, and it's just a constant because at some point, one person feels like they're not being heard and the other person may feel like they're just being talked over. So it's kind of a constant circle. Weight gain. Y'all, this is an awful one, but it is true, right? Weight gain, it's so superficial. Reject. Sorry, got a call there. Weight gain. So what happens is one person may start to feel less attractive because of the weight gain. It then affects their self-esteem, right? Or one person may see the other person that's gaining weight and they may kind of lose that physical attraction that they once had to them. And that leads to self-esteem issues. And it's unfortunate, but this happens a lot in marriages, especially once you have kids, because once you have kids, the hustle and bustle, you're always going, and a lot of times people forget to make time for themselves because they're so busy taking care of the family. The next one is unrealistic expectations. The image of what you thought marriage was going to be like. And a lot of this is because of TV, right? You see stuff happen on TV and you're like, oh yeah, that's what my life's going to be like when I get married. And you have this perception of what it's going to be like. I tell my daughter all the time, only in the movies. Because it's true, a lot of the stuff that happens that you see on TV and in the movies, it only happens in the movies because it's movie magic. They don't show you the full day that somebody goes through. It's just snippets of their life. It's totally unrealistic. Lack of intimacy. At some point, and again, I think a lot of it has to do with once you have kids, that intimacy sometimes changes. It's not like it was when you first met and you were the Energizer Bunny and, you know, the batteries kind of start to die down. And before you know it, you've just kind of become roommates. And so, you know, really though, both are responsible for making that happen. And so again, that comes back to communication as well. Let's see, the next one is lack of equality. This comes down to one spouse thinking that they've taken on... Psych, sorry, my little holder fell. This happens to be where one spouse feels like they're taking on more responsibility than the other person. This definitely happens a lot. It can happen, especially think about people who homeschool their kids or they're stay-at-home moms, and they always feel like they are the ones, you know, that are not getting rewarded for what they do, because they do a lot, right? But the other spouse is out and they feel like they're doing what they need to do and they're making all the money, and then it just becomes a breakdown. Again, a lot of it comes back to communication, but it feels like a lack of equality. The next one is not being prepared for marriage. The stat I read was that half of the divorces happen in the first 10 years of marriage, primarily between years 4 and 8. Right? Because the first couple years, everything's all, honey, 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 and everything's all good. And then life kicks in. And, then you start arguing about different things, about money. Again, it all comes back to communication. The last one I have on here is abuse. And this is kind of a touchy subject. Because we're not always talking about physical abuse. Sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's emotional. And it's not always because the other person is a bad person. A lot of times people just have a lot of baggage that they carry, and it carries over into the marriage, and they haven't taken care of what happened previously. That being said, no one should ever tolerate abuse. So if abuse is happening to you, you need to get out and get out safely. So those are the top 10 reasons that I found that most marriages end in divorce. So over the next few days, I'm going to dig deeper into these and give you some tips on better ways to communicate and figure out how to kind of get back to where you were. Because when you got married, think about the first day that day that you walked down the aisle, or when you first met the person that you decided you were going to marry. You were so excited about it, and you thought everything was going to be sunshine and rainbows. And then, life just happens, and sometimes it gets hard, and it's not easy. And I know, because we were really, really, really close to divorce. And so I'm going to go over these tips over the next few days. And then maybe next week, I'm going to get into our story and how Scott and I ended up where we ended up, which was in marriage counseling after 11 years of marriage. It really got really close to the end. And so I just want y'all to understand there is light at the end of the tunnel, but both parties have to be willing to step up and make a commitment or a recommitment to make things happen. All right, you guys, I hope y'all found this valuable, and I will catch you on the other side.